You ever look at NFL records? In most categories, the gap between the all-time leader and the guy in second place is pretty small. But then you get to Jerry Rice. Rice has his own chapter of the NFL record book. One of the unquestioned GOATs at any position. His numbers are on a different scale to anybody else. The second most receiving yards in NFL history is 17,500. Rice has 22,895. The same story is true with receiving touchdowns, where he has 41 more than anybody else. 41 is more touchdowns than Mercedes Lewis, a former first-round pick who's been in the NFL since the late Bronze Age. And that's just how far ahead of the rest of NFL history Rice is. Every great NFL wideout reaches a point where you start looking at how many years they need to keep producing to get near Rice. And it never sounds realistic when you actually plot it out. Julio Jones was a 7-time Pro Bowler, arguably the best receiver of his generation, him or Antonio Brown. Injury certainly slowed him, but Jones had an 11-year career in the most pass-happy era in NFL history, and he's still over 9,000 yards shy of Jerry Rice. That's as many yards as Stephon Diggs has in his NFL career. Jones fell short of Rice by a whole Stephon Diggs. There is one player, though, that I think had a shot if things had panned out a little differently. Terrell Owens. T.O. was a third-round pick of the 49ers in 1996. At 6'3" and 225 pounds, he was a freak athlete that could run a 4.40 40 and break tackles at will with the ball in his hands. A few receivers since that point have earned the nickname Baby T.O., but nobody's really been given the full T.O. comp. That's how special he was. By his second year in the league, he was a star, and in his third season, he had over 1,000 yards to go along with 14 touchdowns. That started a sequence of double-digit touchdowns in 8 of his next 11 seasons. Long story short, T.O. put together a Hall of Fame resume. He was a member of the 2000s All-Decade team and a 5-time All-Pro and one of the best receivers to ever play the game. But he was also kind of a pain in the ass. His departure from the 49ers was messy. He burned his bridges with the Eagles and his quarterback Donovan McNabb when he tried to renegotiate for more money. After 3 years in Dallas, the team decided not to bring him back.
It's my team. It's my quarterback.
Even after all that, Owens played for the Bills and he played for the Bengals on one-year deals. During that season with the Bengals, a 36-year-old Owens had a 10-catch, 222-yard day against the Cleveland Browns. And this is the critical point in all of this. T.O. was still cooking deep into his NFL career. He was just wearing out his welcome or simply reaching the point where no NFL teams wanted any part of commitments longer than a year. When he tore his ACL following that Bengals season, given his age, the league probably thought that was him done. Randy Moss was on pace to track down Rice at various points in his career, but by the end, Moss was an absolute shell of himself. But Owens was always a physical freak, and that never really went away. In 2022, at the age of 48, a shredded T.O. ran a hand-timed 4.3 840-yard dash to back up a claim he made on a podcast that he could still run under 4.5. He beat out 2 other receivers half his age. Now, look, this was an unofficial time, and I'm not going to argue that the guy actually got faster at 48 than he was at 21, but even if we do some rounding up, he still clearly had legitimate NFL measurables as he approached 50 years old. That same year, he suited up for, played games, and caught touchdowns in the fan-controlled football league, along with Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel. Jerry Rice was able to put his records into the stratosphere because he was still productive at 41 years old. Owens never got that chance in the NFL, but he was still playing some kind of organized ball, albeit a long way off the NFL, almost 8 years older than Rice was at the end. In his last year in the NFL, Owens had 9 touchdowns. At that pace, he was a little over 4 seasons away from catching Rice. He had over 900 yards that year. At that rate, he was still over 7 seasons away from Rice, but that means he could have caught him in his age 43 season if he kept up that pace. Some 5 years before he's out there running a 4.3 840 just to prove a point. We're now in an era where physical outlier athletes are regularly defying what we thought we knew about decline. Tom Brady was playing in the NFL at 45, playing well. Bernard Hopkins won his last world boxing title when he was 48. And whatever you say about T.O., it's hard to argue against the shape he has always kept himself in. Part of the reason that Rice's numbers are so untouchable is because the NFL is a ruthless business. The league is always looking to move on to younger, cheaper options, and rarely do players get the chance to squeeze every last ounce of their playing ability before the league calls the curtain down on them. Rice had a rare opportunity to remain productive and call time in his career only when he was ready. Owens had the decision made for him, but he was the only receiver since Rice that looked like he could last long enough to reach those numbers, maybe even longer. Was it the league's fault, or had Owens ensured throughout his career that he was a bigger headache than it was worth for any prospective team to actually roll the dice on? Either way, it robbed us of seeing whether the one guy that had a shot at chasing down Rice could actually get there.